Imagine two nations. One is internationally recognized by every country in the world. The other is not recognized by most nations despite operating as an independent state for more than 3 decades. One possesses vast oil reserves and enormous natural wealth. The other has limited natural resources but has built a reputation for stability and entrepreneurship. Now imagine both are competing in one of the most important economic races of the 21st century, the race for real estate development. At first glance, many people would assume the winner is obvious. After all, South Sudan is a sovereign nation with access to international institutions and significant natural resources. Meanwhile, Somaliland remains outside the international recognition system despite decades of self-governance. But what if reality tells a different story? What if one of Africa's most surprising property booms is happening in a place many investors rarely discuss? And what if the future of East Africa's property market depends on decisions being made today in cities such as Hargeisa, Berbera, and Juba? Today's documentary takes you deep inside one of Africa's most fascinating economic stories. We will examine the facts, the opportunities, the risks, the investment trends, and ultimately answer one critical question: which nation is truly winning the real estate boom? Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications because this channel brings you premium analysis of Africa's biggest economic and geopolitical transformations. Now let's begin. When people think about economic growth, they often focus on GDP figures, stock markets, oil production, or government budgets. But experienced investors often watch something else: real estate. Why? Because property markets reveal something very important: confidence. People only buy land when they believe tomorrow will be better than today. Businesses only build offices when they expect growth. Developers only construct housing projects when they believe demand will continue rising. And banks only finance major developments when they believe the economy is moving in the right direction. In many ways, real estate acts like a giant economic report card. When property values rise steadily, it often signals confidence. When construction cranes dominate city skylines, it often signals investment. When new neighborhoods emerge, it often signals population growth and expanding economic activity. That is why the real estate battle between Somaliland and South Sudan is so important. It tells us something deeper about the future direction of both territories. Although Somaliland and South Sudan are often discussed within the broader context of East Africa, their histories could not be more different. South Sudan became independent in 2011. The moment was celebrated across the world. Millions hoped independence would bring peace, prosperity, and rapid development. The country entered the international system as the world's newest nation. Investors arrived. Governments pledged support. Development agencies launched major programs. Expectations were enormous. Many believed South Sudan could become one of Africa's fastest-growing economies. Meanwhile, Somaliland had already spent 2 decades building institutions after declaring the restoration of its independence in 1991. Unlike South Sudan, Somaliland received very little international support. There was no widespread diplomatic recognition. There were no major reconstruction conferences. There were no large-scale international investment campaigns. Instead, Somaliland largely relied on its own people, diaspora communities, local businesses, entrepreneurs, and private investment. This difference would eventually shape their real estate markets in unexpected ways. If there is one factor that drives property markets more than any other, it is stability. Investors can tolerate high taxes. They can tolerate bureaucracy. They can tolerate market fluctuations. But instability creates uncertainty, and uncertainty discourages investment. When comparing Somaliland and South Sudan, stability becomes one of the most important factors. For decades, Somaliland has maintained relatively peaceful political transitions. Its cities have continued expanding. Businesses have continued operating, and confidence has gradually increased. This stability has encouraged many diaspora investors to buy property. Families living in Europe, North America, the Gulf states, and elsewhere have invested millions of dollars into land and housing projects. Every year, more residential developments appear, more commercial buildings.
July 2011, the world watched as South Sudan officially became an independent nation. Celebrations erupted across the country. Crowds filled the streets. Flags waved proudly. Leaders from around the world attended the historic event. For many observers, this was the beginning of a new era. A nation rich in natural resources was finally in control of its own destiny. Investors quickly took notice. International organizations established offices. Foreign businesses explored opportunities. Developers began studying the property market, and for a brief period, optimism dominated the conversation. Many believed South Sudan could become one of Africa's biggest economic success stories. The expectations were enormous, and nowhere were those expectations more visible than in the capital city of Juba. Following independence, demand for real estate surged. Government institutions needed offices. International organizations required headquarters. Diplomatic missions searched for properties. Hotels experienced rising demand. Construction activity accelerated. Land values climbed rapidly. Many investors believed they were entering the market at the beginning of a historic growth cycle. Property owners saw opportunities everywhere: residential housing, commercial buildings, hotels, warehouses, office complexes. The logic seemed straightforward. A new nation needed infrastructure. A growing economy needed buildings, and investors wanted to position themselves early. For a time, that strategy appeared highly profitable. The capital became one of East Africa's most closely watched emerging property markets. Developers from neighboring countries arrived. Construction companies secured contracts. Speculation increased. Optimism remained high. Yet beneath the excitement, challenges were already beginning to unlike Somaliland. South Sudan possesses something extremely valuable: oil. For years, oil revenue represented the backbone of the national economy. The resource generated significant government income and shaped economic expectations. Investors viewed oil wealth as a foundation for future development. Many assumed that rising revenues would eventually translate into better infrastructure, stronger institutions, and greater economic activity. This belief influenced real estate decisions. People expected growing demand. Businesses anticipated expansion. Developers projected future growth. In many ways, oil became more than a resource. It became a symbol of future potential. However, dependence on a single sector also created vulnerabilities. When oil prices fluctuated or production faced disruptions, the effects could ripple throughout the economy. Real estate markets often respond quickly to economic uncertainty. As conditions changed, investor confidence also began to shift. Property markets thrive on predictability. Investors want to know what conditions might look like 5 years from now. Developers need confidence before committing millions of dollars to large projects. Banks require stability before providing long-term financing. This is where South Sudan faced significant challenges. Periods of political uncertainty made long-term planning difficult. Some projects slowed. Others were postponed. Certain investors adopted a wait-and-see approach. Instead of rushing into the market, they became more cautious. This does not mean opportunities disappeared. Far from it. But uncertainty changed investor behavior. And investor behavior shapes real estate markets. The difference between confidence and hesitation can determine whether a city experiences a construction boom or a development slowdown. Despite its challenges, Juba continues attracting attention from investors across Africa and beyond. Why? Because opportunity still exists. The city remains one of the least developed capital markets in the region. Large areas of land remain available. Infrastructure needs remain significant. Housing demand continues to exist. Commercial development opportunities remain substantial. For long-term investors, this creates an interesting proposition. Some view Juba as a high-risk market. Others see it as a market with enormous upside potential. History shows that many successful investors entered challenging markets before major growth occurred. The key question is whether conditions will evolve in a way that unlocks that potential. Nobody knows the answer with certainty, but investors continue watching closely. One issue frequently discussed in South Sudan's property sector is housing. As urban populations grow, demand for quality housing often increases. Families need homes. Workers need accommodation. Businesses need housing for employees. Government officials require residences. International staff need secure living arrangements. Meeting this demand requires investment. It requires financing. It requires infrastructure, and it requires confidence. In many emerging economies, housing shortages create major opportunities for developers. South Sudan is no exception. If stability improves and economic growth accelerates, housing demand could become one of the strongest drivers of future real estate expansion. This possibility remains one reason many investors continue studying the market. Perhaps South Sudan's greatest real estate advantage is something very simple. Land. A lot of land. Unlike crowded urban centers where development space becomes increasingly limited, South Sudan possesses vast areas available for future expansion. This gives planners and developers flexibility. New residential districts can be built. Industrial zones can be established. Commercial centers can emerge. Transportation corridors can stimulate growth across large regions. In real estate, land availability can be a powerful competitive advantage. As cities grow, accessible land becomes increasingly valuable. This is one reason some analysts argue that South Sudan's long-term potential remains underestimated. The resources exist, the land exists, the opportunities exist. The challenge lies in creating the conditions necessary to unlock them. As we compare Somaliland and South Sudan, an interesting pattern begins to emerge. Somaliland appears to have stronger momentum today. Its cities continue expanding. Investor confidence remains relatively strong. Development activity continues advancing. South Sudan, however, presents a different story. Its current challenges are significant, but its long-term possibilities remain enormous. This creates a fascinating debate among investors. Would you rather invest in a market already demonstrating steady growth? Or would you prefer a market with greater uncertainty but potentially greater rewards? There is no universal answer. Different investors have different strategies, different risk tolerances, different time horizons. And that is what makes this comparison so compelling. At the center of this real estate battle stand two cities, Hargeisa and Juba. Both serve as political and economic capitals, both attract investors, both continue growing, and both represent the hopes and ambitions of millions of people. Yet despite these similarities, the two cities have evolved in very different ways. Hargeisa's growth has largely been driven by private investment, entrepreneurship, and diaspora capital. Juba's growth has been influenced by government expansion, international organizations, oil-related expectations, and foreign assistance. These different foundations have shaped their property markets, and they reveal a great deal about the strengths and weaknesses of each city. The question is simple: which capital currently offers the stronger real estate environment? To answer that, we need to look deeper. Real estate is not only about buildings, it is about trust. Investors want confidence that projects can be completed. Property owners want confidence that values will remain stable. Developers want confidence that demand will continue. Businesses want confidence that customers will come. Confidence acts like fuel for property markets. Without it, growth slows. With it, investment accelerates. In Hargeisa, many investors point to years of steady urban expansion as evidence of growing confidence. New businesses continue opening. Construction activity remains visible. Residential neighborhoods continue expanding outward. Many diaspora investors see the city as a place where long-term planning is possible. Juba presents a more complicated picture. The city possesses tremendous potential. However, investors often evaluate opportunities more carefully due to the uncertainties that have affected the broader economy. As a result, investment decisions frequently involve higher risk calculations. This difference in confidence levels has become one of the most important distinctions between the two markets. One of the best ways to judge a city's economic strength is by examining commercial property. Commercial real estate includes office buildings, shopping centers, retail stores, warehouses, hotels, industrial facilities. These properties generate economic activity and often indicate whether businesses expect future growth. In Hargeisa, commercial districts have expanded significantly over the years. Banks continue opening branches. Telecommunications companies invest heavily. Retail businesses seek prime locations. Restaurants, hotels, and service providers compete for visibility. This activity creates demand for commercial space. Every new business requires property, and every successful business increases demand for nearby real estate. Juba also possesses a substantial commercial market. Government institutions, international agencies, NGOs, and private companies require offices and operational facilities. This generates demand for commercial property. However, some analysts note that a larger portion of demand is linked to institutions rather than broad private sector expansion. That distinction may become important when evaluating hotels, often reveal how investors view a city's future. Why? Because hotel projects require significant capital. Developers only build hotels when they expect visitors, business activity, and economic growth. In Hargeisa, the hospitality sector has expanded alongside trade and business development. Business travelers, diaspora visitors, government delegations, investors, conference participants all contribute to demand for accommodation. As a result, hotel investment has become an increasingly important part of the city's property market. Juba has also experienced hotel development, particularly during periods of increased international engagement. Diplomats, aid organizations, foreign contractors, business representatives, government officials, all require accommodation. This demand has supported parts of the hospitality sector. Yet the long-term growth of hotels depends heavily on broader economic expansion and increasing visitor numbers. The city that attracts more business activity over time often develops the stronger hospitality market. Another important indicator is retail development. Retail follows population growth, it follows rising incomes, and it follows consumer confidence. As cities expand, demand for shopping facilities increases. Modern retail spaces become more valuable. Commercial landlords benefit. Developers launch new projects. Investors search for prime locations. In Hargeisa, retail activity has become increasingly dynamic. New commercial centers have emerged. Local entrepreneurs continue investing. Consumer spending supports business growth. This creates opportunities for property owners and developers alike. Juba's retail market also holds significant potential. A growing urban population creates demand for goods and services. As purchasing power increases, retail development opportunities may expand. For investors, retail often serves as an early signal of broader economic transformation. One issue that affects every property market is affordability. As prices rise, buying property becomes more difficult for average citizens. This creates a balancing act. Investors want higher values. Residents need affordable housing. Governments often seek policies that encourage both growth and accessibility. In rapidly growing markets, affordability can become a challenge. Some neighborhoods experience sharp price increases. Land becomes more expensive. Construction costs rise. Demand continues growing. The result is a market that rewards early investors while creating challenges for new buyers. Both Hargeisa and Juba face versions of this issue. As urbanization continues, ensuring adequate housing supply will remain a critical challenge. The cities that manage this challenge effectively may gain a significant advantage in the future. After comparing the two capitals, a pattern becomes visible. Hargeisa currently appears to benefit from stronger momentum. Private investment remains active. Construction continues. Diaspora capital flows into the market. Commercial activity expands. Urban development advances steadily. Juba, meanwhile, continues to offer enormous potential. Its strategic importance remains significant. Its land availability remains attractive. Its long-term possibilities remain substantial. Yet many investors continue waiting for stronger signals before committing large amounts of capital. As a result, the current scorecard appears to favor Hargeisa. But this competition is far from over, because the future of real estate is not determined solely by today's conditions. It is determined by tomorrow's opportunities. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. What will these two markets look like 10 years from now? Every major real estate boom in history shares one common ingredient: infrastructure. Before land becomes valuable, roads arrive. Before cities expand, transportation improves. Before investors rush in, governments and businesses build the systems that connect people and commerce. This pattern can be seen almost everywhere, from Dubai to Singapore, from Nairobi to Kigali. Infrastructure changes everything. A road can transform empty land into a thriving commercial district. A port can turn a small town into an international trade hub. An airport can attract investors from around the world. A railway can unlock entire regions previously isolated from economic activity. For smart investors, infrastructure often provides the earliest clues about future property opportunities. That is why the real estate competition between Somaliland and South Sudan is also an infrastructure competition. Because the cities and regions receiving major infrastructure investment today could become tomorrow's among all infrastructure projects in Somaliland, none has attracted more attention than Berbera. The city occupies one of the most strategic locations in the Horn of Africa. Every year, thousands of ships move through nearby international maritime routes. These shipping lanes connect Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. For investors, this creates enormous possibilities. Throughout history, cities located along major trade routes have often experienced extraordinary growth. Trade generates wealth. Wealth attracts investment. Investment creates jobs, and jobs create demand for property. This cycle has transformed cities across the world. Many investors believe Berbera possesses the ingredients necessary to participate in that same process, not because growth is guaranteed, but because location creates opportunity, and opportunity attracts capital. As economic activity expands around ports, demand for housing, warehouses, industrial land, retail space, and commercial offices often increases. This is why so many investors are closely watching Berbera's development. They believe today's infrastructure investments could shape property values for decades. One of the most powerful forces in real estate is something known as the corridor effect. A corridor is more than a road. It is an economic pathway. When transportation routes connect major markets, development often follows. Businesses establish logistics centers, fuel stations appear, hotels emerge, warehouses are built. Housing developments expand. Small towns sometimes become major commercial centers. This process has occurred repeatedly throughout history. Economic corridors create networks of opportunity, and every opportunity creates demand for land. The road connections linking Berbera to regional markets have become a major focus for investors. Many believe these transportation links could stimulate economic activity far beyond the city itself. If trade volumes continue growing, entire regions could experience increased investment. For property developers, that possibility is extremely attractive, because infrastructure does not simply increase accessibility. It changes economic geography. Another critical piece of infrastructure is aviation. Airports connect cities to global markets. They facilitate business travel, support tourism, encourage investment, and improve connectivity. In many developing economies, airport improvements often stimulate nearby real estate development. Hotels appear, office parks emerge, commercial zones expand, residential demand increases. Investors frequently pay close attention to transportation hubs because they understand their long-term impact. Both Somaliland and South Sudan recognize the importance of connectivity. The cities that strengthen transportation networks often gain advantages in attracting investors, and investors, in turn, influence property markets. This relationship between infrastructure and real estate remains one of the most powerful forces shaping urban growth. While South Sudan possesses vast potential, infrastructure remains one of its biggest challenges. The country's size creates unique difficulties. Building roads across large distances requires significant investment. Expanding utility networks takes time. Creating nationwide transportation systems demands long-term planning. Yet infrastructure development is essential for unlocking economic opportunities. Without reliable roads, transporting goods becomes more expensive. Without strong logistics networks, businesses face obstacles. Without connectivity, investment slows. This is why many analysts argue that infrastructure development may be the single most important factor determining South Sudan's future real estate performance. The country has enormous resources. It has significant land availability. It has strategic importance. But turning potential into reality requires physical connections, and physical connections require infrastructure. Many people overlook electricity when discussing real estate. Yet reliable power